The auction block stank of fear and desperation. Jake Morrison pushed through the crowd of alien traders, their chittering voices echoing off the domed ceiling of the Targon slave market. He hated these places, hated everything they represented, but his mission left him no choice. Intelligence reports indicated a human trafficking ring operated through this very station, and he needed evidence. The next lot shuffled onto the platform, and Jake's blood ran cold. A young woman, human, barely 20 years old, stood in chains. Her dark hair hung in matted tangles around her face, and purple bruises marked her pale skin. But her eyes burned with a fierce intelligence that the beatings hadn't extinguished. The auctioneer, a 6-armed Kretus merchant, barked prices in the standard galactic tongue. Jake's translator implant fed him the words. Starting bid, 5,000 credits. Cheap for a human. The galaxy's black markets had discovered that Earth's children made excellent slaves, adaptable, intelligent, and desperate enough to obey. The girl's eyes swept across the crowd and locked onto Jake. Recognition flashed across her face. She saw his human features, his Terran military haircut barely disguised under a trader's cap. Her lips moved, forming words the crowd couldn't hear over the auctioneer's droning. But Jake read them clearly. Master, purchase me. Then free me. His heart hammered. This wasn't protocol. He was supposed to observe, gather intelligence, and report back. But leaving her here meant condemning her to a fate worse than death. The Kredesh were known for their brutality. Their mining operations consumed slaves like fuel. 6,000 credits. A Vaxian slaver raised his bidding paddle, his compound eyes gleaming with interest. Jake's hand moved before his brain caught up. 7,000. The crowd turned to look at him. Dangerous. He'd just painted a target on his back. Human traders were rare in these markets, usually because they ended up on the auction block themselves. 8,000. The Vaxian wasn't backing down. The girl's eyes pleaded silently. She mouthed the words again, more urgently this time. Her chains rattled as she shifted her weight, and Jake noticed the raw wounds on her wrists where the metal had cut deep. 9,000. Jake's cover account would be nearly depleted, but he'd find a way to justify it in his report. The Vaxian clicked his mandibles in annoyance. 10,000. Jake hesitated. That was over his limit. His commanding officer would have his head. But the girl's expression shifted from hope to terror as she watched him falter. Behind her, the Kredesh auctioneer's tentacles writhed in anticipation of closing the sale. 11,000. Jake's voice cut through the crowd like a blade. Silence fell over the auction house. The Vaxian turned his massive head toward Jake, studying him with those alien eyes. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the slaver lowered his paddle and stepped back into the crowd. He knew when he was beaten. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the chamber. Sold to the human trader for 11,000 credits. Jake's legs felt weak as he pushed forward to claim his purchase. What had he just done? He'd blown his cover, spent unauthorized funds, and committed himself to a course of action that could end his career. Or his life. But as they led the girl down from the platform toward him, he saw something that made it all worthwhile. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. Actually smiling. The Kredesh handler shoved her forward, and she stumbled into Jake's arms. Her chains clinked as she steadied herself against his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse from screaming, from begging, from whatever horrors she'd endured. "My name is Lisa Grant. I'm from Chicago. Please, you have to get me out of here before they realize what you've done." Jake helped her stand upright, keeping his face neutral for the watching crowd. "We're leaving. Now. Stay close, and don't say anything." The handler passed Jake a data chip containing Lisa's ownership documents. Jake's stomach turned at the very concept, but he pocketed the chip and wrapped a concealing cloak around Lisa's shoulders. Her chains would have to wait until they reached his ship. They'd barely made it 3 steps toward the exit when the alarms began to wail. Red emergency lights flooded the auction house as blast doors began sliding shut across every exit. Jake's hand instinctively moved to the plasma pistol concealed under his coat. Around them, the crowd erupted into chaos. Alien traders scattered in every direction, some trying to protect their newly acquired property, others abandoning their purchases entirely. "Get down," Jake snapped, pushing Lisa behind a cargo container as energy bolts sizzled through the air above their heads. "What's happening?" Lisa's voice trembled, but she kept her composure, pressing her back against the container's cold metal surface. "Station security. Either someone reported a human trader, or they've discovered I'm not who I claim to be." Jake peered around the edge of the container. 3 Kradesh security officers advanced through the chaos, their armor gleaming under the emergency lights. They carried heavy plasma rifles, weapons designed to punch through starship hulls. One of the officers barked commands in the clicking Kradesh language. Jake's implant translated. "Attention. The human known as Jake Morrison is wanted for infiltration of a restricted facility. Surrender immediately or lethal force will be authorized." So much for subtle reconnaissance. Jake glanced at Lisa. "Can you run in those chains?" She looked down at the heavy shackles binding her ankles together with barely 2 feet of chain between them. "I can try. Not good enough." Jake pulled a small cutting torch from his equipment belt. It was designed for shipboard repairs, but it would have to do. He activated it, and a brilliant blue flame sprang to life. "Hold still." The torch made quick work of the ankle chains, though Lisa bit her lip hard enough to draw blood as the heat washed over her skin. The wrist shackles would have to wait. No time. Another volley of energy bolts struck the cargo container, melting through the outer layer. Superheated metal dripped to the floor, sizzling. "We need a new plan," Lisa said, her eyes darting around their limited cover. "There are 7 exits from this level. I counted them when they brought me in. But they're sealing them all. 7? How long were you here?" 3 days. Lisa's expression darkened. "They kept us in the holding pens below. I memorized everything I could, thinking maybe I'd find a chance to escape. Never thought I'd get out by being sold." Jake's respect for her grew. Most people would have broken under that kind of pressure, but Lisa had kept her wits sharp. "Those holding pins, do they connect to the station's maintenance tunnels?" She nodded. "There's a service entrance in the southwest corner. The guards used it to move supplies. That's our way out." Jake checked his pistol's charge. 70%. Enough for a firefight if necessary, but he'd rather avoid it. The more attention they drew, the harder escape would become. They broke from cover, Lisa moving surprisingly well despite her recent trauma. Jake fired, suppressing shots at the security officers, forcing them to take cover behind overturned auction platforms. The other traders had mostly fled now, leaving the vast chamber eerily empty save for the occasional toppled cage or abandoned slave. One of those slaves, a young Vaxian child huddled in the corner, still chained to a post, its large eyes fixed on Jake with a mixture of hope and terror. "Jake, we can't just leave them," Lisa said, stopping mid-stride. "We don't have time." "If we stop for everyone, we all die, then what's the point?" Lisa's voice rose, anger cutting through her fear. "You bought me to free me, right? That's what I asked for. But freedom for just me isn't freedom. It's privilege," Jake wanted to argue, to explain the harsh mathematics of survival. But the determination in her eyes stopped him. She'd been through hell, yet she still had the courage to care about others. That kind of strength was rare. "Fine. Cover me." He tossed her a small stunner from his belt. It wouldn't kill, but it would drop most species for a few minutes. Lisa caught it smoothly and took up position behind a support pillar. She'd clearly had some training, or at least good instincts. Jake sprinted across the open floor toward the chained Vaxian child. Energy bolts tracked his movement, but Lisa's covering fire kept the security officers pinned long enough for him to reach the post. The child flinched as Jake approached, clearly expecting violence. "Easy, kid. I'm getting you out." His cutting torch made short work of the chains. The moment the Vaxian was free, it bolted toward the nearest exit, not even looking back. So much for gratitude. Jake ran back toward Lisa's position. As he passed another cluster of cages, he fired his pistol at the locking mechanisms, blowing them open. A dozen aliens of various species poured out, adding to the chaos. Some fled immediately. Others, emboldened by their sudden freedom, turned on the security officers. The distraction was exactly what they needed. Jake grabbed Lisa's hand. "Now, move." They ran for the southwest corner, weaving between cargo containers and abandoned auction equipment. Behind them, the sound of fighting intensified as freed slaves battled with station security. Jake felt a pang of guilt for using them as a diversion, but survival demanded hard choices. The service entrance appeared ahead, a nondescript door marked with Kradesh maintenance symbols. Jake slammed his palm against the access panel. It blinked red. Locked. Of course it's locked. He pulled out a bypass device, a piece of illegal tech that could crack most standard security systems. The device hummed as it cycled through access codes. "How long?" Lisa asked, pressing her back against the wall beside the door. She kept the stunner trained on the corridor behind them. 30 seconds. Maybe less. "We don't have 30 seconds. 3 security officers rounded the corner, weapons raised. Lisa fired first. The stunner bolt caught the lead officer in the chest, dropping him instantly. But stunners required time to recharge between shots, and the other 2 officers were already returning fire. Jake threw himself in front of Lisa, his armored coat absorbing most of the first energy bolt. Pain exploded across his shoulder as some of the charge leaked through. He fired his pistol twice, and both officers went down, their armor smoking from the plasma impacts. The door's access panel flashed green. Jake practically fell through the opening, pulling Lisa with him. They tumbled into a dim maintenance corridor as the door sealed behind them. "Are you hurt?" Lisa's hands were already checking his shoulder, her fingers gentle despite the urgency. "I'm fine." "It's just a burn." Jake struggled to his feet, ignoring the searing pain. "We need to keep moving. They'll override that door in minutes." The maintenance tunnel stretched into darkness, lit only by occasional emergency strips along the floor. The air smelled of recycled atmosphere and machine oil. Somewhere in the distance, Jake could hear the hum of the station's life support systems. "My ship is docked in Bay 14, Jake said as they jogged through the tunnel. "It's a light freighter, registered under a false name. If we can reach it before they lock down the docking bays, we've got a chance. And if they've already locked them down, then we improvise." They rounded a corner and nearly collided with a maintenance worker, a nervous-looking humanoid who took one look at their weapons and raised his hands. "Please, don't hurt me." "I'm just doing my job. Relax. We're not here for you." Jake kept moving, but Lisa paused. "Wait," she turned to the worker. "Is there another way to the docking bays? One that security doesn't know about?" The worker hesitated, his eyes darting between them. "If they find out I helped escape slaves, they'll space me." Lisa stepped closer, and despite her chains, despite her injuries, she radiated a quiet authority. "Look at me. Really look. I'm human. He bought me today to set me free. We're not criminals. We're trying to stop a trafficking operation that's kidnapping people from Earth. If you help us, you'll be helping end something truly evil." The worker's resolve crumbled. "There's a cargo transport system that runs parallel to the main corridors. It's automated, but you can override the controls." "Bay 14, you said?" "I can get you there, but you'll have to move fast. Once they realize you're not in the main tunnels anymore, they'll seal everything. Thank you, Lisa said softly. What's your name? Kelvin. Thank you, Kelvin. If we make it out of here, I'll make sure people know you helped. Jake felt a mixture of admiration and frustration. Lisa's compassion was remarkable, but it was also dangerous. Every second they delayed increased the odds of capture. Still, without Kelvin's help, they might not have found the cargo transport at all. The worker led them through a series of twisting passages, each one narrower and more claustrophobic than the last. Finally, they emerged into a large chamber where automated cargo pods moved along magnetic rails, shuttling supplies between different sections of the station. You'll need to hijack one of the pods. Kelvin gestured to a control terminal. I can program it to take you directly to Bay 14, but the ride will be rough. These things aren't designed for passengers. We'll manage. Jake moved to the terminal while Lisa kept watch on the entrance. Kelvin's fingers flew across the controls. Done. Pod 7 is yours. It'll depart in 30 seconds. He turned to leave, then paused. Good luck, both of you. As Kelvin disappeared back into the maintenance tunnels, Jake and Lisa climbed into the cramped cargo pod. It was barely large enough for two people, forcing them to sit pressed together in the darkness. The pod lurched into motion with a mechanical whine. Through the small viewport, Jake watched the station's interior blur past at dizzying speed. The magnetic rail system was designed for efficiency, not comfort. Every turn threw them against the pod's walls, and the acceleration made his shoulder wound throb with fresh agony. Lisa's hand found his in the darkness and squeezed. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. I know this wasn't part of your plan. Plans are overrated, Jake replied, trying to inject some humor into the situation. I always wanted to blow my cover and become a wanted fugitive. She laughed, a sound that was half relief and half hysteria. When I was on that auction block, I thought I was dead. Or worse, I'd been praying for days that someone, anyone, would help me. Then I saw your face in the crowd, and I just knew. I don't know how, but I knew you were different. The pod decelerated sharply, throwing them forward. Through the viewport, Jake could see the docking bay approaching. Bay 14. His ship, the Evening Star, waited in its berth, a sleek courier vessel that looked unassuming but packed serious firepower. We're almost there. Jake readied his pistol. Once we exit this pod, we'll have maybe 60 seconds before station security locks onto our position. Straight to the ship, no stops, no distractions. Lisa nodded, her expression hardening with determination. I'm ready. The pod came to a jarring stop, and the hatch hissed open. The docking bay stretched before them like a vast metallic cavern. Ships of every size and configuration lined the berths, from massive cargo haulers to nimble racing craft. Jake's Evening Star sat in berth 17, not 14, as he'd originally thought. The pod's navigation must have rerouted them to the nearest available exit point, Bay 17. Jake's mind raced, calculating new distances and angles. We've got twice as far to run. Then, we better run fast. Lisa was already moving, her bare feet silent on the cold deck plates. The chains on her wrists rattled with each stride, a metallic percussion that seemed impossibly loud in the cavernous space. They made it halfway across the bay before the announcement echoed from every speaker. All personnel, security alert, fugitives in Bay 17. Seal all exits and prepare to engage. Blast doors began descending at every entrance. Above them, automated defense turrets swiveled downward, targeting systems painting them with laser designators. Jake counted 6 turrets with clear-firing solutions. They had seconds before those weapons opened fire. Behind that fuel tanker. Jake pointed to a massive ship undergoing refueling operations. The tanker's bulk would provide cover, and security protocols would prevent the turrets from firing near volatile fuel lines. They dove behind the tanker just as the first energy bolts scorched the deck where they'd been standing. The turret's targeting lasers swept back and forth, searching for a clear shot. "We're pinned," Lisa said, breathing hard. She pressed against the tanker's hull, the metal warm from the fuel transfer process. "How do we get from here to your ship?" Jake studied the layout. The Evening Star was 3 berths away, maybe 200 meters. Between them and safety lay open deck, minimal cover, and increasingly aggressive security systems. Above, he could hear the whine of approaching security drones. "We can't go around. We have to go through." Jake pointed upward. "That tanker has an access ladder to its dorsal airlock. We climb up, cross over its hull, and drop down on the far side. It'll cut the distance by half." "That's insane. The hull will be pressurized. One wrong step and we're either in vacuum or we trigger a fuel explosion." "Got a better idea?" Lisa looked at their situation and grimaced. "No." "Let's go." The access ladder was a flimsy thing designed for emergency use only. It groaned under their combined weight as they climbed. Below, security officers poured into the bay, their shouts echoing off the walls. Energy bolts struck the tanker's hull, leaving scorch marks but failing to penetrate its armored skin. Jake reached the top first and helped Lisa over the edge. The tanker's dorsal surface was surprisingly smooth, designed to minimize atmospheric drag during planetary approaches. Every step was treacherous, like walking on ice. "Stay low and keep moving." Jake started across the hull using maintenance handles as handholds. Behind them, a security drone crested the tanker's edge, its weapons pod rotating toward them. Lisa didn't hesitate. She aimed her stunner and fired. The bolt caught the drone's sensor array, frying its targeting systems. The drone spun wildly and crashed back down into the bay. "Nice shot." "I play a lot of video games. Or I used to." Before all this, they reached the tanker's far edge and looked down. The drop was manageable, maybe 3 meters to the deck below. Jake's ship sat tantalizingly close, its boarding ramp already extending in response to his remote signal. "Jump and roll." "Try to land on your shoulder, not your legs," Jake demonstrated, dropping from the tanker and executing a textbook landing roll. Pain flared in his burned shoulder, but he pushed it aside. Lisa followed, less gracefully, but still effective. She hit the deck hard, gasping as the impact drove the air from her lungs. Jake pulled her to her feet, and they ran the final distance to the Evening Star. The boarding ramp seemed miles long. Every second stretched into eternity as they pounded up the metal surface. Behind them, security officers rounded the tanker, weapons raised. Energy bolts sizzled past, so close Jake could feel their heat. They burst into the ship's interior, and Jake slammed his fist on the emergency seal button. The boarding ramp retracted with hydraulic speed, and the outer airlock cycled shut just as a bolt struck the closing hatch. The impact rang like a hammer on an anvil, but the military-grade armor held. Bridge. "Now." Jake grabbed Lisa's hand and pulled her through the ship's narrow corridors. Evening Star wasn't large, designed for a crew of 2 at most, but every centimeter was optimized for speed and survival. The bridge was a cramped space dominated by a pilot's chair and co-pilot station. Jake threw himself into the pilot's seat, his hands dancing across the controls. The ship's engines roared to life, their distinctive whine filling the cabin. "Docking clamps released. We're free." Lisa strapped into the co-pilot seat, her eyes wide as she watched the bay's interior through the view screen. "Are they going to let us just fly away?" "Not a chance." Jake's fingers flew across the navigation console. "Hang on." The Evening Star lifted on its maneuvering thrusters, rising toward the bay's atmospheric shield. The shimmering energy barrier was the only thing separating them from the void of space. Station regulations required departing ships to wait for clearance before passing through the shield to prevent depressurization accidents. Jake had no intention of waiting. He diverted power from life support to the forward shields and punched the throttles. The ship accelerated toward the barrier at reckless speed. "We're going to hit it," Lisa shouted. "That's the idea." The evening star struck the atmospheric shield like a missile. Energy cascaded across their forward screens, and alarms shrieked throughout the ship. For one terrifying moment, Jake thought the shields would fail. Then they burst through into open space, leaving the station behind in a blaze of disrupted energy. But they weren't safe yet. 4 security cutters detached from the station's defense perimeter, their sleek hulls accelerating in pursuit. The cutters were faster and more maneuverable than the Evening Star, designed specifically for intercept missions. "We've got company," Lisa said, her voice surprisingly calm. She studied the tactical display with the intensity of someone who understood what she was seeing. "I see them." Jake brought the Evening Star about, pointing the nose toward open space. "Can you work a weapons console?" "I told you I play video games." Lisa's fingers found the co-pilot's weapons controls without prompting. "But these aren't games." "Same principle. Point and shoot. Try not to hit anything friendly." The first cutter opened fire, particle beams slicing through the black. Jake rolled the Evening Star, presenting its smallest profile. "Return fire, now." Lisa triggered the ship's rear-mounted pulse cannons. The weapons spoke with a satisfying thump, sending coherent energy downrange toward the pursuing cutters. Her first volley went wide, but the second caught one of the cutters along its port side, shearing through its shield generators. "Got one." Lisa's voice held a mixture of triumph and horror. "There are 3 more, and they're learning our pattern." Jake pushed the Evening Star into a series of evasive maneuvers weaving through the debris field that surrounded the station. Old hulks and construction waste provided momentary cover, but the cutters were relentless. One of the pursuing ships surged forward, trying to match their course. Jake waited until the last possible moment, then reversed thrust and activated the dorsal maneuvering jets. The Evening Star performed an impossible flip, bringing its nose to bear on the surprised cutter. All forward weapons, full spread. Lisa didn't need to be told twice. She hammered the firing controls, and the Evening Star's main guns blazed. The cutter tried to evade, but at that range, there was nowhere to go. It took the full volley amidships, its reactor breaching in a brilliant flash. 2 down, 2 to go. The remaining cutters had learned caution. They hung back, pacing the Evening Star, but not closing for a kill shot. Jake recognized the tactic. They were hurting him, trying to force him toward the station's heavier weapons platforms. "They're boxing us in," Lisa said, confirming his assessment. "What do we do?" "Something stupid." Jake plotted a course directly through the densest part of the debris field, an area that traffic control had marked as hazardous to navigation. The Evening Star wasn't a large ship, but threading that particular needle would require precision piloting. "Are you sure about this?" "Not even a little bit." Jake engaged the autopilot override and took direct manual control. "Here we go." The debris field loomed ahead, a chaotic jumble of destroyed ships, broken station modules, and industrial waste. At their current speed, collision with even a small fragment could prove fatal. Jake's hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting their course by fractions of degrees, timing their passage to slip through the ever-shifting gaps. Behind them, the cutters followed, but their larger size made navigation more difficult. One of them clipped a spinning piece of hull plating and went into a tumble, its pilot fighting for control. The second cutter wasn't so lucky. It tried to match the Evening Star's trajectory but misjudged a crossing pattern. A massive piece of debris, possibly the remains of an old freighter, materialized directly in its path. The cutter pilot tried to evade, but momentum is an unforgiving master. The collision was catastrophic. Jake allowed himself a tight smile. And then there were none, but Lisa was staring at the long-range sensors. "Jake, we've got a bigger problem. Something's launching from the station." Something big. The tactical display updated, and Jake's smile vanished. A destroyer-class warship was detaching from the station's main dock, its massive engines already glowing with acceleration. The Evening Star could outrun cutters, might even evade a frigate with some luck, but a destroyer was a different matter entirely. That's the Crimson Fang. Jake recognized the ship's profile from intelligence briefings. A Kraytish heavy destroyer with enough firepower to level a small city. We can't fight that. Then we run. Running might not be enough. Jake pulled up a star chart, his mind racing through their limited options. The nearest friendly port was 3 days away at maximum speed, and the Evening Star's fuel reserves wouldn't last that long if he kept running the engines hot. They needed somewhere to hide, somewhere unexpected. There, Lisa pointed at the display. That moon, the one marked as uninhabited. If we can reach it before they get a weapons lock, we might be able to hide in the polar ice fields. That moon is uninhabited because it's uninhabitable. The surface temperature drops to minus 200 degrees Celsius. Our ship isn't rated for those conditions. Better frozen than dead. Jake sent the Evening Star into a hard burn toward the ice moon, pushing the engines to 120% capacity. The frame groaned in protest, and warning lights flickered across the console like angry fireflies. Behind them, the Crimson Fang gave chase, its superior mass making every course correction a ponderous affair. "They're launching missiles," Lisa called out, her eyes locked on the tactical display. 6 contacts closing fast. Jake checked the fuel gauge and made a decision he knew he'd probably regret, diverting all non-essential power to engines and rear shields. Everything else goes dark. The cabin lights died, plunging them into the eerie glow of instrument panels and the view screen showing the ice moon growing larger ahead. Life support reduced to minimum, meaning they had maybe 30 minutes before carbon dioxide buildup became a problem. But if those missiles hit, oxygen toxicity would be the least of their worries. The first missile detonated 500 meters behind them, a proximity fuse rather than a direct hit. The shockwave caught the Evening Star's shields and sent them tumbling. Jake fought the controls, using attitude thrusters to stabilize their spin. The second and third missiles followed, their explosions creating a deadly pattern designed to herd them into the fourth missile's kill zone. "Lisa, I need you to time something for me." Jake pulled up a subroutine he'd hoped never to use. "See that control marked Emergency Core Purge? The one with all the warning labels? That's the one. When I give the word, you activate it. That'll vent our reactor's coolant directly out the rear. It won't hurt the reactor permanently, but it'll create a thermal bloom that should confuse the missile's seekers." "Should?" "Best I can offer right now." The fourth missile screamed toward them, its warhead large enough to crack a small asteroid. Jake watched its approach on the tactical screen, counting down in his head. 3 seconds. 2. 1. Now. Lisa slammed her palm on the purge control. The Evening Star shuddered as superheated coolant vented into space behind them, creating an expanding cloud of thermal interference. The missile's targeting system locked onto the hottest thing it could find, the coolant cloud, and detonated harmlessly 2 kilometers away. But the fifth and sixth missiles were already adapting, their seekers switching to backup targeting modes. Jake had one trick left, and it was barely a trick at all. He aimed the Evening Star directly at the ice moon's upper atmosphere and pushed the throttle past the safety limiters. "We're going in too fast," Lisa said, her voice tight with controlled panic. "At this speed, we'll burn up on entry. Only if we hit atmosphere head-on." Jake's hands were steady on the controls despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "I'm going to skip us off the upper layers, use the friction to slow down just enough. It's called aerobraking, and it's either going to save us or kill us. Those aren't great odds. Welcome to my life. The evening star hit the ice moon's thin atmosphere at a shallow angle, and the view screen erupted into sheets of flame. The hull temperature spiked, alarms screaming warnings about structural integrity. Jake held their course by feel as much as instruments, making microscopic adjustments to keep them from digging too deep into the atmosphere or bouncing back into space. The remaining missiles weren't so sophisticated. They followed the evening star into the atmosphere, but their targeting systems couldn't compensate for the interference created by the ionized gases. One after another, they lost lock and tumbled into the ice moon's surface, their explosions visible as brief flashes far below. "We made it," Lisa breathed, watching the tactical display clear of threats. Not yet. Jake pulled the evening star up and away from the atmosphere, but their velocity had dropped enough that the Crimson Fang was closing the gap. The destroyer couldn't follow them into the atmosphere, not without risking damage to its much larger hull, but it didn't need to. It simply had to wait for them to come back up. Unless they didn't come back up. Hold on to something. Jake nosed the evening star back toward the ice moon, this time aiming for a controlled descent. The ship shuddered and bucked as they hit thicker atmosphere, but he kept them stable. Below, the ice moon's surface resolved into a nightmare landscape of frozen methane oceans and crystalline mountain ranges that glittered like broken glass. "Where are you landing?" Lisa asked. "There." Jake pointed to a massive canyon system that cut through the northern hemisphere like a wound. Those canyons go deep, and they're shielded from orbital sensors by the surrounding cliffs. If we can set down in there, the Crimson Fang won't be able to get a clean targeting solution. And if they decide to just bombard the whole area, then we'll have a very brief, very exciting end to our day. The canyon walls rushed up to meet them, jagged formations of frozen gases that predated Earth's solar system. Jake threaded the evening star through the narrow passage, occasionally having to roll the ship to avoid protruding spires of crystalline nitrogen. The canyon floor was barely visible in the dim light filtering down from above, but he caught glimpses of what looked like frozen rivers, ancient flows of liquid methane locked in time. He found a relatively flat section sheltered by an overhang and brought the evening star down with a series of carefully controlled thruster bursts. The landing skids crunched into ice that probably hadn't been disturbed in millions of years. For a moment they just sat in silence, listening to the tick of cooling metal and the howl of winds outside the hull. The external temperature reading showed minus 187 degrees Celsius. Stepping outside would mean death in seconds, even in a full environmental suit. Now what? Lisa asked. Now we wait. Jake pulled up the sensor logs. The Crimson Fang is still up there, running search patterns. Eventually, they'll either give up or call in more ships. Either way, we're stuck here until they leave. How long is eventually? Could be hours. Could be days. Jake stood and stretched, wincing as his shoulder wound pulled. First things first, we need to get those chains off you properly, and I need to tend to this burn before it gets infected. The Evening Star's small medical bay was barely more than a closet with a diagnostic scanner and some basic supplies, but it was enough. Lisa sat on the examination bench while Jake carefully cut through the remaining chains with his cutting torch. The metal had worn grooves into her wrists, raw wounds that would take time to heal. "I'm sorry," Jake said as he cleaned and bandaged her wrists. "If I'd known this was going to turn into a running firefight, I would have gotten you proper medical attention first." "Are you kidding? You saved my life. More than that, you risked everything to free me." She looked at him intently. "Why?" "You don't know me. For all you know, I could be a criminal or a spy or worse. I saw someone who needed help. That's enough." Jake finished with her wrists and started examining his own shoulder wound. The burn went deeper than he'd thought, and some of the surrounding tissue was already showing signs of infection. "Let me." Lisa gently took the medical scanner from his hands. You can't reach it properly anyway. She worked with surprising skill, cleaning the wound and applying a regenerative gel that immediately began numbing the pain. You're good at this. My mom was a nurse. She made sure I knew basic first aid. Lisa's voice softened. I wonder if she knows what happened to me. If she's looking for me. How did you end up on that station? Lisa's hands stilled for a moment before continuing their work. I was studying xenobiology at the university in Chicago. During summer break, I signed up for a research expedition to one of the colony worlds, cataloging alien plant life. It was supposed to be safe, supervised, just undergrads and a couple of professors collecting samples. What went wrong? Our ship got intercepted by raiders 3 days into the journey. They knew exactly when we'd be traveling through that particular sector, knew we'd be vulnerable. She finished bandaging his shoulder and sat back. They killed the professors, took all the students. I was with 15 other people. By the time we reached that station, I was the only one left. Jake felt cold fury building in his chest. The others? Sold off at different markets along the way. I only survived because I told them I had knowledge of Earth's defenses, that I could be valuable for intelligence. It was a lie, but it bought me time. You're smart. That's good. Smart keeps you alive. Lisa met his eyes. What about you? You said you were on a mission. Does that mean you're military? Was military. Earth Defense Force, Intelligence Division. But after today, I'm probably considered a deserter. Jake leaned back against the medical bay's wall. I was supposed to infiltrate the slave markets, gather evidence of the trafficking networks, and report back. Instead, I bought a slave, destroyed my cover, and stole a ship to escape a destroyer. Why did you do it? Really? Because leaving you there wasn't an option. Jake's voice was firm. I've spent 3 years watching people suffer, documenting their pain, filing reports that lead nowhere. I was tired of just observing. Sometimes you have to act, consequences be damned. A proximity alarm chimed softly from the bridge. Jake moved quickly despite his injury, Lisa close behind. The tactical display showed multiple contacts descending from orbit. Not just the Crimson Fang now, but smaller craft as well. Dropships, most likely carrying ground teams. They're coming for us, Lisa said. Jake studied the display, his tactical mind racing through scenarios. The canyon's geography made it difficult for dropships to land nearby, but difficult wasn't impossible. Given enough time, they'd saturate the area with troops and flush the Evening Star out of hiding. We can't fight them. Not on their terms. Jake pulled up a geological survey of the ice moon. But maybe we don't have to fight them at all. What are you thinking? These canyons aren't natural. They're stress fractures in the moon's crust caused by tidal forces from the gas giant it orbits. That means the entire region is geologically unstable. You want to cause an avalanche. More like a collapse. Jake pointed to a section of the canyon wall about 2 kilometers from their position. See this formation? It's a crystalline overhang, probably weighing millions of tons, balanced on a relatively thin support structure. If we can destabilize it with a precisely placed explosive charge, the whole thing comes down and blocks the canyon. They won't be able to reach us without clearing the debris, which could take days. And we use that time to do what? To repair, refuel, and figure out our next move. The Evening Star has mining charges in the cargo hold, standard equipment for prospector cover identities. One of those charges, properly placed, should do the job. Lisa absorbed this. So we have to go outside. In minus 187-degree cold, wearing environment suits not rated for these temperatures. For about 15 minutes, yes. We're going to die, aren't we? Probably. But at least it'll be on our terms. The environmental suits were designed for short-term survival in hostile conditions, with enough life support for 2 hours and thermal insulation rated to minus 130 degrees. They were about to push those limits by 60 degrees, which meant they had maybe 20 minutes before hypothermia became irreversible. Jake loaded 2 mining charges into an equipment satchel while Lisa double-checked their suit seals. The airlock's outer door looked impossibly threatening, a barrier between survival and a frozen hell that would kill them in seconds if anything went wrong. Stay close, communicate constantly, and if your suit temp drops below critical, we abort immediately. Jake locked his helmet into place and watched the heads-up display flicker to life. Suit integrity good, oxygen at full, temperature regulation active. Lisa's voice came through the comm, slightly distorted by the encryption protocols. Ready as I'll ever be. The airlock cycled open, and the ice moon's atmosphere rushed in with a sound like distant thunder. Even through the suit's insulation, Jake felt the cold, a bone-deep chill that seemed to radiate from the landscape itself. The canyon floor sparkled under the evening star's exterior lights, every surface coated in frost that glittered like diamond dust. They moved carefully across the treacherous terrain, testing each step before committing their weight. Above, through the narrow slice of visible sky, Jake could see the Crimson Fang's running lights as it circled like a predatory bird. Dropships descended along the canyon's length, their searchlights cutting through the darkness. Temperature dropping faster than expected, Lisa reported. I'm at minus 90 in the suit. Same here. We need to move faster. Jake increased his pace, pulling Lisa along. The target formation was visible ahead, a massive overhang that jutted out from the canyon wall like an accusing finger. Getting there meant crossing an open stretch where they'd be visible to any searchers, but the alternative was freezing to death. Halfway across the open ground, Lisa's foot broke through what looked like solid ice. She dropped with a startled cry, and Jake lunged to grab her. His hand caught her arm just as she slipped into a concealed crevasse, her legs dangling over darkness that extended down beyond the reach of their suit lights. I've got you. Pull up slowly. Jake braced himself and hauled her back onto solid ground. Her suit's damage indicators lit up with warnings. You're leaking atmosphere. The fall had torn her suit along the left thigh, a 2-centimeter gash that was venting her air supply into the frozen atmosphere. Lisa immediately slapped emergency patch over the tear, but the damage was done. Her remaining air had dropped to 40%. I can make it, she said. But her voice betrayed her fear. We'll make it together. Jake transferred some of his oxygen reserve to her suit through the emergency buddy line. It left them both at 35%, enough for maybe 10 more minutes of activity. The formation loomed above them, and Jake could see why the Geological Survey had flagged it as unstable. The entire structure rested on a natural arch of nitrogen ice, beautiful and deadly. A precisely placed charge would shatter that arch and bring millions of tons of crystalline methane crashing down. Jake activated the mining charge, setting its timer for 5 minutes. That should give us enough time to get clear. Should being the key word. He attached the charge to the arch's weakest point and started the countdown. 5 minutes. Let's move. They ran, or at least attempted to run, across the broken ice field. Every step was an agony of cold and effort. Jake's suit temperature had dropped to minus 120, and he could feel the cold seeping through despite the insulation. His fingers were numb, his breath coming in ragged gasps that fogged his helmet. Lisa stumbled, her damaged suit failing faster than expected. Jake caught her and practically carried her the last 100 meters to the evening star. Behind them, he could hear the whine of approaching dropships. Security teams would be on the ground within minutes. They fell through the airlock with seconds to spare on the charge's timer. Jake slapped the emergency seal button, and the outer door slammed shut. The airlock pressurized, and they tore off their helmets, gasping in the ship's warm air. The explosion was felt rather than heard, a deep subsonic rumble that made the entire ship vibrate. Jake stumbled to the bridge and pulled up the external cameras. The formation was collapsing exactly as planned, a slow-motion avalanche of crystalline debris that filled the canyon like a frozen tidal wave. Dropships caught in the collapse tried to pull up, but two weren't fast enough. They disappeared under the cascading ice, their transponders winking out on Jake's tactical display. The others scattered, their pilots unwilling to risk further casualties in the unstable conditions. The collapse created a wall of debris nearly 50 meters high, completely blocking the canyon and burying the evening star's position under a protective layer of ice and rock. On the tactical display, Jake watched the Crimson Fang alter its orbit, unable to penetrate the debris with its sensors. "We bought ourselves some time," Jake said, collapsing into the pilot's chair. His entire body ached from the cold and exertion. "How's your suit repair holding?" Lisa examined the patch on her thigh. "It'll hold for now, but that suit's done. One more trip outside, and it'll fall apart. Then we better make sure we don't need another trip outside." Jake pulled up the ship's diagnostic systems. "We've got problems. The hard atmospheric entry damaged our primary communications array. The reactor's running at 60% efficiency because we never refilled the coolant after our emergency purge, and our fuel reserves are at 43%. Can we make it to the nearest friendly port? If we had full fuel, maybe. As it stands, we'd run dry 3 days short." Jake rubbed his face, feeling the exhaustion settling into his bones. "We need a plan that doesn't involve running blind into space with a destroyer hunting us." Lisa was quiet for a moment, studying the star charts. "What about calling for help? Your people, Earth Defense Force. They must have ships in this sector. My people think I'm either dead or a traitor by now. Any distress call we send gets intercepted by that destroyer before it reaches friendly forces." Jake stood and paced the small bridge. "We need leverage, something to force them to let us go." Lisa's eyes widened. "The data chip. The one the Kredesh gave you, with my ownership documents." "What about it?" "It's not just my documents. When they first captured me and the other students, I saw them cataloging everything. Every person they grabbed, every transaction they made, it all went into their central database. That chip has to be linked to that database somehow, for authentication purposes." Jake pulled the chip from his pocket and examined it. "You're saying this chip might contain access codes to their entire trafficking network, or at least a way to access it? If we could hack into their system, we'd have evidence of everything. Names, dates, transaction records, the whole operation. That's leverage. It's also incredibly dangerous. Hacking into a criminal network while they're actively hunting us is probably the worst idea I've heard all day. Do you have a better one?" Jay considered their options and came up empty. No, I don't." He moved to the Evening Star's computer station and inserted the chip. "Let's see what we're working with." The chip's contents appeared on the screen, and Lisa leaned over his shoulder to examine them. As expected, her ownership documents were there. A clinical list of her physical characteristics, estimated value, and purchase history that made Jake's stomach turn. But there was more. Authorization codes, network addresses, encrypted handshake protocols. "This is it," Lisa breathed. "This chip isn't just a document, it's a key. They use it to authenticate buyers in their system, to prevent fraud. If we can spoof our credentials, we could access everything." Jake's fingers flew across the keyboard. "I'm setting up a secure connection through a series of relay servers. It'll take them time to trace us back, but not infinite time. Once we're in, we need to grab everything we can and get out." "How long do you need?" "Give me 30 minutes. You've got 20. "That destroyer will find a way through the debris eventually." Jake nodded and focused on the task at hand. Breaking into the trafficking network's database was like peeling layers off an onion. each security protocol revealing another beneath it. But whoever designed the system had relied too heavily on the physical security of their chip authentication. Once you had a valid chip, the internal security was surprisingly lax. I'm in. Jake's screen filled with data, thousands of entries spanning years of illegal operations. Names, faces, locations, everything. This is bigger than I thought. They're not just grabbing random colonists. They've infiltrated legitimate transport companies, bribed customs officials, even placed moles in some planetary defense forces. Download it all. We need every byte. Lisa watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. This is enough to shut down their entire operation. If we can get it to the right people. Jake set up multiple redundant downloads, copying the data to every storage medium the Evening Star possessed. But first, we have to survive long enough to deliver it. The ship's proximity alarms began chirping. Multiple contacts approaching from above, moving slowly but deliberately. The Crimson Fang had deployed mining drones, autonomous machines designed to clear debris fields. They were chewing through the collapsed formation, slowly opening a path. They're not giving up, Lisa observed. Would you? We just killed several of their people and we're sitting on evidence that could destroy their entire operation. They'll throw everything they have at us. Jake finished the download and pulled the chip. We need a new plan. Running won't work, fighting won't work, hiding won't work. What's left? Talking. Jake brought up the long-range communication system. I'm going to send a message to every ship, station, and settlement within 50 light years. Public broadcast, impossible to suppress. Telling them what? Everything. Who we are, what we found, where they can download the complete database. Even if the Crimson Fang kills us, the information gets out. Jake began composing the message. This is Jake Morrison, formerly of Earth Defense Force Intelligence. I'm transmitting evidence of a massive trafficking operation targeting human colonies. The attached data contains names, locations, and transaction records spanning 5 years. Verify it, share it, act on it. You're making yourself a target for every criminal organization in the sector. I became a target the moment I bought you off that auction block. Might as well make it count. Jake added Lisa to the message. Lisa Grant, abducted from a research vessel 3 weeks ago, held and sold on Targan Station. I'm one of hundreds, maybe thousands. Don't let my situation be for nothing. He encrypted the database, attached it to the message, and hovered his finger over the send button. This changes everything. Once this goes out, there's no taking it back. Good. Send it. Jake pressed the button, and the message burst outward at light speed, propagating through every communications relay in the sector. Within minutes, it would reach dozens of stations. Within hours, hundreds of ships. Within days, it would be everywhere. The Crimson Fang's response was immediate and violent. A full spread of missiles launched, 12 warheads screaming toward the Evening Star's position. But the mining drones were still clearing debris, and the missiles couldn't reach through the remaining ice. They're going to collapse the whole canyon on top of us, Lisa said. Probably. But they're too late. The message is already out, spreading faster than they can suppress it. Jake watched the tactical display as responses began flooding in. Some were from Earth Defense Force vessels, others from independent colony governments, a few from journalist networks. The data was being verified, corroborated, and acted upon. A priority message flashed on the screen. Military encryption, Earth Defense Force signature. Jake's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. This is Admiral Chen of the EDF carrier Conviction. We've received your transmission and verified its contents. All charges against you are suspended pending investigation. Transmit your coordinates. We're sending a rescue force. Jake looked at Lisa, hardly daring to believe it. They're coming for us. We just need to hold out a little longer. The mining drones broke through the last of the debris wall, and the Crimson Fang's weapons locked onto the Evening Star. Jake diverted all available power to shields and braced for impact. The first missile struck like a hammer blow, the entire ship shaking. The second followed, and the third. Shields at 40%. Jake gripped the controls. "We're not going to make it." "Yes, we are." Lisa's voice was steady, certain, because we already won. "That message is out there, and nothing they do can stop it now. We changed things." The fourth missile never arrived. Instead, the tactical display filled with new contacts. 3 Earth Defense Force frigates dropping out of hyperspace directly above the ice moon. Their weapons locked onto the Crimson Fang, and a warning message broadcast across all frequencies. "This is the EDF frigate Resolute. You are ordered to cease hostilities immediately and surrender for questioning regarding trafficking violations." The Crimson Fang tried to run, but the frigates were faster and fresher. Their opening salvo crippled its engines, leaving it drifting and powerless. Within minutes, boarding teams were swarming the crippled destroyer. Jake slumped in his chair, the adrenaline finally draining away. "We did it. We actually did it." Lisa reached over and took his hand, her grip warm despite everything they'd been through. "Thank you for buying me. For freeing me. For not giving up. Thank you for being brave enough to ask for help." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "What are you going to do now?" "Go home, see my mom, finish my degree." She smiled, and it was the first genuine smile he'd seen from her, and testify against every single person in that database. "What about you?" Jake thought about his destroyed career, his unauthorized actions, the consequences waiting for him. Probably face a lot of uncomfortable questions. Maybe a court-martial. But you know what? Worth it. A transport shuttle descended from one of the frigates, its lights cutting through the darkness as it approached the Evening Star's position. Jake activated the docking protocols and stood, offering Lisa his arm. "Ready to face the universe?" Lisa took his arm, standing tall despite her injuries, despite everything she'd survived. "With you?" "Absolutely." They walked together toward the airlock, toward rescue, toward whatever came next. Behind them, the ice moon's frozen landscape stretched endlessly, indifferent to the human drama that had played out on its surface. But somewhere out there, across dozens of star systems, people were reading their message, acting on their evidence, beginning the long work of bringing traffickers to justice. One auction block at a time, one freed soul at a time. The galaxy was changing, and it had started with a desperate plea from a slave who refused to give up hope and a soldier who refused to look away.